winner. Thank you and have a marvelous day.
Just wanted to start off this Big Button Game Club episode with some positivity. We are going to be talking about Persona 3, The Answer. As I was playing the journey, everyone was asking me if I was going to try it out. I said, of course, I am very curious about The Answer. When I said that, some people in my chat came up to me and was like, "You're going to play The Answer? Good luck." And that got me really curious to see what was the overall impression of The Answer. So when I did some light research on it, what I found was a lot of people did not like it. It was mostly negative. People were saying that it's way too hard, it's way too grindy. The no compendium is kind of weird and dumb, and people did not like the characters in the story as much. They thought that it was kind of a betrayal of what they were in the journey. Knowing that it was going to be really hard and it had all these different goofy things going on with the gameplay, I was telling people, look, I'm going to play this as far as I can. If I hit a wall and I can't beat it, and it just feels like no matter what I do, I can't get past it, be it grinding, whatever, that'll be it. And then I'll just watch the story on YouTube, and then I'll just talk about Persona 3 The Answer that way. You know, I'll talk about what I see on YouTube, etc. I said that, and I got like two groups of people. One telling me, cheering me on, saying, "Don't quit it. Please stick with it. See where it goes. Don't quit it. It's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be fun. Just stick with it, please." And then I got another group that was telling me like, "Hey, I'm very curious of what this is. I've never like really seen The Answer or played it, and this is like interesting to me." So those two things, and actually myself, were kind of getting around to it and kind of liking The Answer. Those three things kind of helped me get through it, and actually made The Answer way better than what I was expecting. So I'm pleased to announce that I actually like The Answer. I'm probably the minority of the Persona 3 fan base that actually genuinely likes The Answer. So let's just get right into the gameplay, and then I'll get into the story and all that. The gameplay of it is interesting. They do tweak it a lot since you're playing as Aigis as the main character, obviously. When you start fights, you have to like kind of shoot, so there is some footing you need to keep in mind when you do it. But the beginning of the game, I feel that it weeds people out. Like, you cannot have access to the mall until after the first major guardian fight. Like, you fight two guardians, and then it will let you go to the mall, I believe. That part was like, hey, it is tough because you have to ration your items. You can't just spend your healing items and revivals. It's like nothing. So whatever you spend, you had to be careful with. And I do like that challenge of it, but when I was playing it, I was sitting there thinking, I could see why people dropped it. This is pretty rough. Like, it's a big ask to say, hey, go through all this. The Guardians are like, they have a lot of HP, and you do like no damage, and no items. You can't buy items. Because the other thing is that, being an epilogue, all of the characters have their phase 2 personas. So everyone has their evolved persona at this point. However, all of their skills are based back to level 1. So, like, Yukari, for example, doesn't have Diaran, she has Dia now. Instead of Garula, she has Garu. So you have to kind of re-grind them back up to where they were. And on one hand, it's like, this is right after the journey. There should be no reason for this to happen. On the other hand, it would be kind of OP if you just went in with your endgame stats. However, I do think it's a little bit bullshit when the enemies are like endgame enemies too. They can wipe you out very easily with no issue. Like, even the smaller enemies that are just roaming the labyrinth can just nail you down. I do think that there could have been a happy medium of that. Like, maybe, they could have just tweaked it better. The whole design choices that the Ainzer has kind of feels like it's mean-spirited by design. I don't know how it was when Persona 3 came out because I wasn't in the fan base at all at that point. If people were begging and demanding Atlas to give answers about Persona 3, I wonder if Atlas made the answer out of spite. Like, they were just like, oh, you want fucking answers? Okay, bitch. Here's a labyrinth of bullshit. Good luck. And if that's the case, I could definitely see like this game being designed the way that it is. But it's hard to tell, I don't know if it's necessarily done for that kind of meta reason of like, oh, we're just gonna give him hell, fuck it. Or if it's just like they had some genuine reason for why they designed the way that the game is. Because the beginning is so cruel. It's like no items, you have to ration it off. The Guardian can just one-shot you easily. And if you go to a Guardian floor in the journey, you at least have a checkpoint, so you can always go back there and try again. You don't have to worry about going through the blocks again. But in the answer, the Guardian floors don't have checkpoints. You only get a checkpoint when you beat the Guardian. Otherwise, if you leave, you have to go through all those floors again unless you save at the Guardian. If you save there, that's where you start, etc. But you cannot go straight there if you want to ever refill your HP or SP. Which can be very rough at the beginning. Like, when that was going on, I was like, are they serious with this? Like, really? Because, like, the stages still have that same mentality as Tartarus, where the layout changes every so often. So, one run could be different from the other. The answer, oddly, was making me think of Hades. Not that I'm saying that answer took from Hades. Maybe it's the other way around. Hades stole from the answer, but it kind of made me think of that because in some ways the answer kind of feels like Persona's answer for a challenge mode. It's like, hey, go through these labyrinths that are very challenging and see how far you can go. Because if you die if you say, depending on where you last save, you go last save, geez. And if you die, you lose all that progress. It's kind of like that mentality of like, go as far as you can, and see what you can do. The boss fights can be pretty rough. I think the boss fights kind of also contribute to another issue where the RNG just feels very mean. Like, it just, like, of course Persona has nature of RNG that feels like it just wants to fuck you up, but the answer is such specific RNG. It's like, it favors the enemies way more than it favors you. The enemies barely miss, if they do. And they will always evade attacks. Let's say that you have a Guardian that is weak to fire, and you tell Junpei to use his fire attack, or you just do a knockdown, whatever. It will always miss. It will always evade it because it has an ability for that. But if you have, like, let's say I give you Kari a accessory to evade lightning, a chance of that, and she will never have that chance to evade. The enemy has a higher chance than the actual player, and it's kind of like such a ridiculous RNG with it too, and probability. A lot of that kind of stuff permeates through the boss fights. They always get criticals if they need them. There are just moments where you can just go into a Guardian thinking that you're all prepared, and then you start, and the Guardian just happens to land either a weakness or a critical, and it just kind of rides that out and kills you. And it's like, what do you do? There were Guardians where it's like, I don't even know if I could grind to beat them because they have such perfect answers for my team. And then it just kind of came off as either luck, I beat them, or it did feel a little bit like I got good. Like, it just has this weird balance where either I got good at the game and I used my skill to beat them, or it's like by some sheer luck I was able to do it. The other thing that they changed that I didn't really mind was the Velvet Room. They got rid of the compendium, which I understand. Like, that's a big part of the Velvet Room and fusing, but fusions also want you to have this in the back of your mind of you're sacrificing 2 personas to get 1 persona that you think is better. And sure, you can always buy back personas and all this kind of stuff, while the answer does not let you do that. And I kind of like that mentality almost because it kind of made fusions more interesting and more important. I started to really like look at my persona saying, can I really how far can I take this persona? It's like you have a tube of toothpaste and you're trying to see how far you could stretch it. Like, oh, I don't want to go to the supermarket for like another week or two. Let's see how far I could stretch this tiny little toothpaste tube. So I do like that. A lot of times I found myself really seeing how far can I push these personas. What can I fuse to be good? I kind of liked going through personas, fusing them, and keeping what I fused, and thinking in the back of my mind, well, if this persona outlives its usefulness, I could fuse this to be something better maybe down the road. The only time that I felt very, very, like, mixed on fusing a persona was with Koryu. I can't remember if I wanted to fuse Koryu for the final boss fight or the boss fight that I needed Null Charm. I can't really remember between those two. But I needed to fuse Koryu to get the Witch. And I was sitting there thinking, do I really want to get rid of Koryu? Koryu has like Invigorate, so if I use a lot of SP, I could just kind of bank SP regen a little bit. So I was thinking about that. It had Makern, I think that's how it pronounces, the one that gives you the magic wall, magic mirror, whatever. It had Sema Recarn, Medi Dioran, Weary Thrust, and I think it also had a defense buff as well for the party, and I was like, this is the perfect persona for a lot of reasons. But it came to the point where it's like, I need to fuse them. This persona that I'm getting out of it has better status ailments. Like I can actually block insta kill moves. I think it was either that it blocked light and dark, and it repelled fire, or that it was whatever. It was one of those things. And I was like, I really need that for this fight, and that's what I fused it for. It was rough saying goodbye, and I was like, I don't know if I'll like really like that, but I did it anyway, and I was able to beat the game with that anyway. But that was the only time in Persona in the answer that I was like, I don't want to get rid of Koryu, but I might have to for to get through the game. Other than that, I was fine fusing all my personas. Like I liked a lot of them, but it was like, yeah, I'm fusing this to get something better. So it's like, I was fine with that. But I do see that the lack of a compendium could be make or break in some strategy with fighting enemies. But I didn't think it was that big of a deal because I was already kind of thinking that way with fusions anyway. But it's like, there's nothing to fall back on in this. They also don't have the 4-way fusions or the hexagon fusions or anything else. They only have 2 and 3-way, which is fine. I don't think you really need anything else than that in this particular game because they give you all of the fusions. Usually you would have to do certain things, like do certain requests for Elizabeth to get certain fusions, while this they just give you everything off the bat. The other thing that people complained about was the grinding. I did not have an issue with grinding in this game. I think I relied heavily on the music, to be honest. I think the music made the grinding way more soothing. The other thing is that Persona 3 The Journey had that emotion system where if you grind a lot, your party will start to get tired and they'll leave you, and then they'll be sick the next day. So that kind of like hampers your grinding a lot in the journey, but that's so that you can do S-Link stuff, you can improve stats. So there's things you could do to get around it. The only time I had an issue with that was when I was trying to get Satan. You could see a little bit of my frustration when I was streaming it because I was really worried that going into the final boss, my party would all be sick or tired. And it was like, I really don't want to go into the final boss fight with like a tired party. That would be rough. But I don't think they allow that to happen. I think they all just default to good anyway, but I'm not too sure. But that was getting on my nerves. I was like, oh my god, I really hope this doesn't happen. But I need Satan. While with this, you don't have to worry about their emotions. They stay as good permanently. On the flip side, they don't get great, they only stay good. But that allows you to grind endlessly just because you don't have S-Links. That's pretty much why. It'd be ridiculous to just have this emotion system and nothing to do. It's like, huh? So at least the game bends itself to be grind friendly. But I do see that some people might not like how it leans on it way too heavily, but I didn't have an issue with that. The length of the game is like, if you're really, really good, it could be 20 hours, but it took me 30 hours. So I would say, like, on average, I'd probably say like 25, 30 hours it would take people to beat it. And I think that's fine. I think if you're gonna have a game that's grind heavy, I think the length makes sense for it to be that way. I think the issue with grinding in the answer, however, is that they use guardians as normal enemies for a while. Like, I've noticed Grief of Juten, my longtime enemy, as a normal enemy, but I was able to get around that because I was Aegis, and Aegis has piercing attacks, so I didn't have to worry about giving him health or whatever. And it was just me and Metis, so it wasn't that bad. But it was definitely like, yeah, they definitely use mini bosses in the Labyrinth of Time and the answer, which I do think could be pretty rough because they could one-shot you pretty easily and wipe out all your progress. Like, I was getting really far and I was getting really close to a level I needed for a persona, and I was like, man, if I die, it's gonna suck. And one enemy got the drop on me, and I was like, oh, and I had like low health. It was a rough fight. And I was like, dude, if I died, oh my god, that's so much progress out the window. But luckily, I was able to get away. I used an item to get to it, ensure an escape, because I just didn't want to lose that XP. But other than that, I don't think the grinding is all that bad. The environment designs aren't bad. I kind of like them. This is gonna sound really weird, and you have to bear with me, but I think at the time that this game was made, it was a PS2 era game, it was kind of cute and charming to see developers find ways to solve problems with, hey, we're re-releasing this game, we need a mode that is going to warrant people to buy it again, but it's going to give them something new. And I think the answer is a creative way to solve that issue where it's like, hey, we don't have to build a whole new game. We could just reuse assets, maybe change the paint on them, and just have that. And I think that made it more interesting, in my opinion, than to, go through Tartarus again or whatever. Like, it reuses some, even it reuses some assets from Tartarus, but that's, in my opinion, to build up to a memory door that you work for. At the end of each door, Labyrinth of Time, each door you go through, at the very end, there's a door that reveals something of the past. So I do think it makes sense that one of the final floors of each area is a level of Tartarus. You could argue that's lazy and it reuses a lot of these assets and themes, but I kind of like that because it kind of shows that, hey, this developer is like trying to re-release something and they can't really afford to make completely new things, so they just use similar assets, etc. And I think that's interesting. The music is great. Now, this might be a little controversial, but don't get me wrong. I love the theme of Tartarus. I love that each block subtly adds things to the theme that you might not be aware of when you first play the game or you first listen to it, but when you listen to it more often, you start to notice, oh, they added this to the song, they added that to the song. I like Tartarus, don't get me wrong, but I think the theme, Interstices of Time, I think might be better. I just like how heavy and weighty it is. It's very emotional. I really like it. I really loved each door I was going in. It was getting more and more like, dun, like it was like pounding your heart each time. And the final area was amazing. I love the final four of Tartarus's theme. It's a great song. It's like it sums up everything. But this, like, you could argue that the Interest of Time is more blatant with its shifts, but it works off. It pays off to me. I loved it. Um, it kind of made each grind session like, yeah, like I could grind again. You know, there might be a time, guys, where I could just stream and we'll just be like, hey, we're just going through the Interstitials of Time. Fuck it, let's do it for no reason. I just really loved that you could always go back into the Interstitials of Time and just listen to that theme. It's so good. I really enjoyed that a lot. Um, maybe I'll go back and fight the Reaper. Maybe I should do that. Fight the Reaper in the answer because he does show up in the answer, which is very scary in the answer. I think it's actually scarier than in the journey because it's so hard to get around in the answer sometimes. And when you hear Fuka say, "I sense death," you're like, "Not now! I need to find the stairs." So I do like that there is some similarities with it, which goes into the story side of things. The other songs I like is this one might be controversial, but I don't think it is. I think you guys are gonna agree with me on this. But I think the Answers version of Mass Destruction is the best version. I like the vanilla version of Mass Destruction. Don't get me wrong, that's a great song, but the Answers version of it is so fucking good. I found myself just starting combat just to hear it. You just hear the trumpets, and then you hear like the baby start up, and then you hear the new beat. Oh my god, it's so good. I love the like that whole line of like not a mouth you so like that whole segment is so fucking good. Like I really love that version of Mass Destruction. I did hear, and I didn't know this, but that apparently the Answers version of Mass Destruction is just the second verse of the Journey's Mass Destruction, which is really cool. I didn't even know that, and that makes me want to listen to both versions back to back to see how it sounds. I'm sure someone did that on YouTube, and I'll look it up. But I didn't know that, and hearing that, it's like, holy shit, that's pretty cool. That's pretty genius. The other songs I really liked was Hurtful Cry. This one I was hearing a lot because I had the soundtrack, and I had no context for it. And I was like thinking to myself, when will this song play? I can't think of when, but this song sounds awesome. I love this song. And they even did a good remix of it in Persona 4 Arena that I really liked. Hurtful Cry it just has this nice like somber beginning where it's like, oh shit, and then it just hits you with intensity. The other song that I didn't appreciate at first, this song is called Darkness. This one I had no context for, so when I was hearing it, I was like, this sounds kind of weird and eh. But then I played the final boss of the answer, and that was the theme of it, and that was when I started to be like, this theme is awesome. Like, it really feels like that you are overcoming something and you learn something at the same time. It's so weird, and I love it. I really love the music. And I think the music really makes the answer as a whole such a tolerable piece for me. I think that's what was kind of carrying me through. If it wasn't for the music, I don't know. Like, it's such good beats. The only song I didn't really care for was The Seal of Time. And then there was that other song, I think it was like Blind Alley. The Blind Alley was alright. I just didn't have a strong opinion for it one or the other, but I still loved the music. And it also had a new intro for Persona 3, that FES intro, which is really cool. I really like that intro. I don't like the menu theme either. That one I thought was a little boring, but it's fine. I know what it's from. I think it's Brand New Days, just done in a more subtle, like, calming way. But that's the soundtrack. The soundtrack is just amazing. It's really good. But let's get into the story. Now, a lot of people might be mad. They might get mad at me. I thought the story was pretty good. I thought it didn't do any disservice to anything. My first concern about the answer was that I was thinking it was gonna undo a lot of stuff that the main game did. And I think some people said that too, that it did. and I kind of feel like maybe they interpreted the story differently. Like I guess you could argue that this is a little bit open, I guess, but I think that either I'm reading it wrong or that maybe they're reading it wrong. I don't know because uh I'll get to some of them when I get to them. Okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's just start at the beginning of the story. So everyone is breaking up. People are graduating. People are moving out. Mitsuru's collecting the evokers from everyone because they don't need them anymore. And then like something's going on with Aigis. They all gather to see what's wrong with her, and they notice that there's another robot lady that attacks them. Aigis steps in to stop them, and all that's going on. The one thing I will say about Yukari was that I thought it was a little cold because she was like, "Oh, I was worried about her, and there's nothing wrong. Wow, I wasted my time," and I was like, "I don't. These are your friends, and you're just like." Man, I wish I guess had a virus or something. I don't know. It was that I thought was weird, and I guess they do kind of explain it later on, which I'll get to later. But they find out this other robot lady was actually Aige's sister, and there was this whole thing that is causing a ripple in time. There's this weird thing going on in the basement of the dorm. So they have to venture into the Desert of Doors, or the Desert of Time, or whatever, to see the Abyss of Time. The Abyss of Time, to see what's going on. And each door that they go to reveals something about their past, on how they awaken. Now, this I do see some of the criticism. I've seen people complain or bring up that some of these flashbacks have no bearing on the story. This kind of there is almost as fan service. I don't wholly agree that they were bad just because they were fan servicey. I think it led to something good. Like, I don't know. I liked seeing these things and it was interesting. I think the only issue I have with it, which will tie into a later complaint I'll have, is that they could have been utilized better. I do agree with that. I do think that they had this idea, and they didn't know how to utilize these ideas properly. I think it was just kind of a little bit lazy, but but with that in mind, I do think that it is nice to see how they were when they're younger, and it really, parallels how they are now. Like, you see how different they are and where they came. So I don't necessarily think it's bad. I think the only one I thought was kind of pointless was Ken's. His was just kind of like, he's in an interrogation booth, and they're saying, "Wow, kid, your mom died," and it's like, okay, like, and Nakihiko's is pretty bad too. Like, it was all right, but it was just kind of like, eh. I think the only one I generally liked a lot was Yukari's and Aigis's, not Aigis, Mitsuru's past. I thought those were a little bit more interesting. Some of them were just kind of, they were kind of there. But again, I think that the utilization of this idea of going back to their past wasn't utilized fully as it could. So as they're going through this, they're also chasing a shadow figure that looks eerily like the main character. And this was kind of making me concerned that they were going to bring back the main character to life. Every time I saw him, I was like thinking maybe they're going to say some bullshit like, oh, the shadow can give the main character a second chance or whatever the fuck. But I do like that it symbolizes the party's regret. You finally chase him down to the final area, and you see that this is just a shadow born from the team. It's all of their regrets manifested into the main character and a shadowy figure. And I love that. I think it does a good job criticizing the party. A lot of people, I think, saw the main team as a perfect team. Like, oh, by the end of the journey, they're perfect and all this. But I think the idea that after all is said and done, they're still making mistakes is fine too. I mean, they're people, but they had this regret on how the end works, how the end happened. Some people regretted that they haven't moved on yet and all this stuff. So after they beat the monster of regret, which used all of their personas except for Metis's persona. Uh, once you beat that shadow form, it's like, okay, you get your keys. What do these keys mean? Well, we can either open the front door and move on from the past and not be able to go back, and everything will go back to normal, etc. Or if you go to the main character's dorm, you can go back in time, the actual past, and actually relive those experiences. And this is kind of where a lot of people kind of fell off, in my opinion. I think this was the part where you'll either be on board with what's going to happen or you're not. I was on board with it, but I get why people were off the train at this point too. So they kind of use that regret as a rationale, like, my regret was that, thinking back what's going on, but clearly we should move on. We should move forward because that's the whole point. There's nothing we could do in the past, so it's better to just move on. Yukari argued, saying that we should go back in the past and do it all again, and we could try to save the main character and all this stuff. She was kind of framing it kind of weird, like saying, "Oh, I want to see him again," and she kind of made it sound as if that's the only end goal. But I don't think it's necessarily the character. I just think it's how it was written and it might even be the translation that could have muddled a lot of the dialogue. Especially during this time in game development where a lot of stuff was really rough with translations. But I think what she was trying to get at was that we should try it again, because all of our responses, all of the stuff that we did is resting on one person sacrificing, and that's kind of easy and bullshit. Like, you don't think that maybe we could have done more? Like, we just did nothing, and the main character was like, I'll take care of it. Like, it's like, a friend helps you out with something, and you kind of felt that you could have done that. Like, I could have done something, I didn't need him to do this and ruin his day or something. It's that, I think it's that kind of courtesy kind of thing that they were trying to go for, because I do think that Yukari isn't saying that we should let everyone die for the sake of this one person. I think she wanted to fight Nyx again and try to keep everyone alive, because I think a lot of people get muddled with moving on from the past and that being the dying wishes of the main character, or just the point, and what she's actually saying. Because I think it's kind of unfair to not really understand what Yukari's even wanting. I think a lot of people just write it off as this was a big deal. Nyx is a big deal, and why would anyone want to go back and try again? If you fail, that's the end of everything. But I do think that there is a point in saying that we already wagered everyone's life to fight Nyx to begin with. What is it to do it again? Like, that's why, in my opinion, that's why she calls Junpei out for being scared or being afraid, because he was ready to just accept what happened and move on. He didn't want to go back and change everything, even though he doesn't want to do that, and he's like, no, it's fine. Like, it sucks in the past. I think it's just the conflict that it stems from this issue is that I feel like this should have been something that should have been introduced earlier on, and they could. And this is what I meant earlier, that they could have talked about this key stuff in the beginning, and they're like, so we'll have a choice to make at the end. It's like, yeah, I don't know much, but it might be a choice that you guys have to decide on, and you have to keep that in mind or whatever. And as they're going through the abyss of time, each flashback they think about the past, because each flashback makes them think about it. And if they think about the past, that could then inform them to either decide to go back to the past, to change it, or to move on, to carry on that theme about it. I think dumping all this information and conflict at the tail end of the game, I thought that's kind of why a lot of people were turned off, because it was such a hard turn that it's like, what? I saw what they were getting at with that conflict, and I was fine with it. I thought it was interesting because a lot of movies and a lot of shows and a lot of games, all these stories have some bullshit reason for everyone to change their mind, or some rationale. And sometimes you can write it very well, but other times it's like, they clearly didn't want to go that route of what if, the party separates or whatever. So it's like, no, they have to have a reason to come together and agree or whatever. Um, and I like that the answers, these characters stuck with their guns and they had a backbone. And I think that it reflects very well with Aigis being in between because she understands where Yukari's coming from and Akihiko's coming from and Junpei's coming from. Like, she knows where these people are coming from. So she clearly doesn't want to side with one or the other because she's undecided herself. She doesn't make a decision truly until the second to last fight in the 2-on-2 battles that they have for the keys, that she realizes that they have to move on. Like, they have to fight for the here and now and fight for the people who they can fight for. I mean, they can't fight for people who are already lost, etc. So I do think that conflict was worth it to go through that journey and development. A lot of people give shit to Yukari for being selfish, and I think what I was trying to convey to people when I was talking about this is that just because Yukari is doing things and she's being selfish doesn't mean that you can't empathize with what she's doing. You don't have to agree with her to see her point. Like, I don't agree going back in the past and fighting Nyx again. I don't think that was the right answer, obviously, but I do see why she wanted to go back, and I think it's a decent thing to argue. I think it's a worthy discussion to have with a party that are Persona users, because it's important to think about, like, what if you could do more? Like, what if, the main character didn't have to do what he did? Until later, Yukari does realize that, it would have had to be played the same way when you get to the very end of the game. But she also goes through another development before that. When you beat her and Mitsuru at the very end, she still wants to go back and she's still very sorrowful about it, but Aigis tells her, like, look, I know where you're coming from, I want the same thing, but we have to move on. Like, it's not about going back to see him, it's about moving on for him and all this stuff. And I think, Mitsuru also summed it up better, saying that, she knows that she was suffering, and that's why she fought with him. Now, of course, people also complain about Mitsuru for doing this, but I think it is important because who is to say that, let's say Yukari won that fight, who is to say Mitsuru won't turn around and say, okay, Yukari, I didn't want to do this. I thought, I didn't thought it would come to this, but I'm not giving you my key. I was, whatever. Who's to say that she wouldn't turn on Yukari at that point either? But it was important for Mitsuru to stick by Yukari's side because I think when someone is hurting like that, it's kind of cruel and callous to just say, "No, you're wrong. Shut up. You're not gonna get the window seat, bitch. Go away." Because you're not really helping her get over her own issues that way. If anything, you're kind of making it worse for her to cope with it. So I do kind of think that Mitsuru was in the right by siding with Yukari, even though she didn't agree with her, because she needed someone to be with. I mean, Yukari was hurting and she was making the wrong decisions, and Mitsuru just didn't want her to be doing this alone. And I do think that if push came to shove, Mitsuru probably would have told Yukari to stop if they beat Aigis and Metis. I don't think that Mitsuru would be like, alright, Yukari, let's do what you want. I think Mitsuru probably would have been like, no. I know I fought for you for this long, but, I just want, to clarify with you and all this kind of stuff and talk about it, whatever. But you ended up winning anyway, so it's all good. So that's why I like that conflict. I think it was rushed. I do agree with that criticism because a lot of it was just kind of like, we need to get to this point. We need to get them to fight. And I think if they spent more time building it up, it would have had a better payoff. Like, as I said, if they introduced the ideas of the keys or making a decision at the very beginning of the game and have that build up as a key theme moving forward, it would have worked out. The only thing they tried to do was have Metis kind of foreshadow it by trying to defend Aegis by killing the party members. And it's like, that is too like silly to be like, yeah, see, that justifies this. It's like, nah. I think that if they just introduced the keys, if they introduced the idea of there being a choice or something, I think the payoff would have worked and the conflict would have been natural. I think going through the whole game and then at the very end being like, surprise, they're gonna fight, it's like, it's too sudden. And but I think a lot of people focus on that and they don't really see the core idea behind what happened. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. If I can see what you're trying to say, I can see it. And I don't want to necessarily compare this to Last of Us 2 because Last of Us 2 is a bad game, a bad story, but I could see the little gears and the little pieces in Last of Us 2 and the little things that they were trying to do with it that they failed at, but they tried, and I could appreciate that. With the answer, I definitely see what they're doing, and that get my mind racing. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And that's why I kind of gave it a lot of slack, because mostly the answer, I'm giving the answer the slack here, okay? I just want to clarify. I'm giving the answer the slack because I think it was an interesting conflict that I liked seeing. It kind of, as rushed as it felt, I do think it was an important conflict to have between these party members, and the fact that they didn't back down, I appreciated. I think the only thing you could argue is that why didn't Akihiko, Ken, Koro, and Junpei team up when they didn't agree with Yukari and Mitsuru? And some people argued why didn't they team up with Aegis? Is different because Aegis didn't make a decision. See, at the final fight, Yukari even brings this up because in the beginning, Yukari kind of dogs on Aegis for being a fence sitter. Like, she's like, oh, you don't even know what you want. You're not making a decision. All this kind of stuff. And she was right to be mad because at least Akihiko, Junpei, and all these people made a decision. Aegis was the only one that's like, I don't know, guys, can we calm down? And she didn't really make a decision. She didn't make a decision, as I said, until the very end, before the final fight, when Metis kind of said, look, Aegis, I know you hate me now because of this, but I just want you to know I can't afford to lose you, and I will do whatever it takes, to keep you alive, whatever. She kind of opened up to her, and that was when Aegis realized that it is important to keep people alive and to be with others. So it's more important to fight for the here and now and the people that you're with now than to worry about what happened in the past. And that's what she carried into with the Mitsuru and Yukari fight. When Aegis tells Yukari this, Yukari responds with oh, so you made a decision. Now you look like you're alive like you did back then. Mentioning that all this time, Aegis kind of seemed to be very apathetic. She was just questioning things. She didn't know much. She didn't have any strong feelings for anything. But in the journey, she had strong feelings for stuff. She had strong feelings to protect the main character. She had strong feelings for fighting and living in her own self-worth, etc. While in the answer, she was just not healthy mentally. She was just kind of she was kind of like a corpse pretty much. And when she finally made a decision and she told that to Yukari, Yukari gave her credit for that by saying you are actually alive right now, and this is something I haven't seen you since, way back. So it was clear that Yukari wasn't dogging on Aegis because she didn't side with her. It was just that Aegis didn't make a decision, and she didn't know what she was doing. Even in the first fight, she was like, I don't want to fight. And then she fought, and then she saw what happened. She was like, what? But through that, she learned an important message. So I do think that as rough and rushed that conflict is, I think what I got out of it was fine. I enjoyed it for what it was, and it was interesting. It kind of made me like the team even more. So I don't really agree with these people dogging on Yukari or Akihiko or these other party members, because I think this was an important side of things to have to see. Uh, so that's why I think I'm gonna get a lot of shit for this, but I don't agree with people dogging on Yukari's character. I'm not saying that she's not selfish. She was acting selfishly, and she was acting emotionally as well. And I think that's only natural. You lose someone you love, or someone that you're close to, or you long for. You're not gonna take it very well when they're gone. And she didn't take it out very well. And when she saw this golden opportunity that she really wanted that opportunity, and once it was taken from her, she was, of course she'd be miserable. But they talked her down. They talked to her and they calmed her down, and it made the team stronger. So I don't really agree with the criticisms of these characters. I think it panned out in the grand themes of things. Uh, Now, the very end, when they introduce Erebus, I liked his design. I'm gonna be honest. I like Nyx's design. Nyx is a rad design, but Erebus, I think, is a very cool design. It's like a demonic rabbit with two heads on both ends. Like, I was joking in the stream saying this is what happens when you don't give Cleo a carrot. She becomes this big monster that's gonna ruin everything. But I do like Erebus, as well as a thematic character, in the sense that it symbolizes the manifestation of people's malice and longing for death. Um, the journey is about life and living, and focusing and celebrating that. But I think the answer also questions that you can't just focus on life. There's also importance in death, but there's also an important balance of the importance of death. Like, you can't just long for it. You can accept it, but you can't long for death. Um, because they were talking about how people have been wanting death, and it kind of ties into these very dark themes of suicide and all stuff. Like, these people who think these things, they all manifest into this big monster that wants to summon Nyx because of all these people's malice and wishes. Is this deity that's like, we must release the seal and let Nyx in. The seal is another source of contention I feel with a lot of people. They say that the seal is the main character's life essence. So I guess some people could argue that the main character didn't die, that he just became a seal. But I would argue, what kind of life is that? It doesn't. The game never says that that the main character will come back to life. They never say that. It just says that the main character uses life essence to form the seal from Nyx, to defend it from Erebus, pretty much, so that people don't long for Nyx at all. And Erebus was made to break the seal so that Nyx can come. So I don't really think that it was saying that Nyx, the main character's alive. I think it was just saying that he sacrificed his life to form a seal with his life essence. So I do like that it showed that, and it showed that it was like, that's what happened. I don't necessarily think, if you were to ask me, do we really need to see what the main character did to Nyx? I would say it's fine as it is, but I don't think saying that, he sealed her, is that big of a deal either. Like, it doesn't erase the fight. Like, it doesn't make it trivial. Like, a lot of there would be a risk if it's like, we can just make the whole fight trivial, or the whole thing trivial. Like, if it was this big time paradox thing that always goes back to zero, or some dumb shit like that, I would not like it. But this is like, no, we're accepting what happened. He's gonna be a seal forever. That's that. So I didn't mind that, but I do like the idea of Erebus. I thought that was a very cool addition to it. It kind of brings this idea of balance between life and death, and this longing for it too, because you don't really think about it, but at one point you had to have thought about death, like what happens, what happens when this happens, and all this stuff, and all these thoughts, all these things that come to your mind manifest into Erebus, with everyone else thinking the same thing, and all this kind of stuff, and this empty longingness for Nyx. And that was something that I do think was a interesting question to tackle, because at the end of the journey, they don't really talk about what happened to these people who were longing for Nyx, that were apathetic and all this stuff. Like, what about them? Like, sure, they stopped Nyx, but, did they really stop it? I mean, they could always come back and all this stuff. There could always be another generation of people wanting Nyx or whatever. So I do like that the answer kind of tackles that question and says, well, this comes in the form of Erebus. All these people that were longing for Nyx and all this stuff, they formed Erebus. And then even at the end, after you beat Erebus, it is told to you that it can happen again. Like, just because you defeat Erebus doesn't mean he's gone for good. He can always come back, because people will always long for death. And I guess this is another source of contention, because I think it was Metis brings up that you could still keep your promise to the main character by protecting life and having people no longer seek death or whatever. I feel like it was that people kind of insinuated, or unless I'm reading people's messages wrong, but saying they could have seen that as a sign that the main character could come back. I don't agree with that. Just because they're saying that doesn't mean that, because the other thing is that you could have this current generation in this universe all agree that life is cool and dandy and not believe in death anymore, or whatever the fuck, but that doesn't mean that the next generation or the generation after that, etc., won't lose that message. I mean, eventually all this stuff will all be folklore into the future generations, so who is to say Nyx and Erebus won't make a return? And who's to say how long that seal is gonna last? So I wouldn't say that, the answer brings the main character back to life, or that it cheapens the end. I think it just kind of continues the end and really shows the other side of the coin. So just because you took care of Nyx doesn't mean that nothing else will happen. Erebus is still out there. Like, they couldn't steal Erebus. Think about that. It didn't end with, like, Aiga sacrificing her life to seal Erebus. The final, plot twist in the game is that Metis is actually Aegis's other self, which is really cool. Like, they kind of tie it back into, when you first fight the monster of regret, they do mention that personas are shadows, and that was something I was thinking throughout the entire game of Persona 3, thinking to myself, they never really mention that much or at all that their personas are shadows. They never really bring it up. And they only bring that it's their other self, it's their other them, whatever. And it's up into this point where they're saying, where they bring up saying, oh, your personas are shadows, right? And they're like, whoa, what? Like, that's why, all these things are happening. And I do like the story idea that the Abyss of Time and the Labyrinth of Doors, all that shit, is just another, is a balance with Tartarus. Like, it's a reaction to Tartarus. Tartarus happened, this thing was formed because of it, and they're both balance each other out. So, so usually there would be no shadows in the Labyrinth, but now that Tartarus is gone, the Labyrinth gets all the shadows. So I do like the idea that through these experimentations and the formation of Tartarus has created this other thing unintentionally. That was a reaction to it, which plays into the whole time and space thing that you see that shows had its ability to do, and this thing is kind of a manifestation of that. So they mentioned that then, and then here they finally bring up that Metis is just a shadow of Aiga's other self, which is another theme that Persona had in 4 and 5. I haven't played 1 or 2, so I'm not going to talk about those two, but it was a theme in 4 and 5 mostly, because I played those. So it's nice to see that was actually in Persona 3, just in this kind of way. And I'm gonna say it. I think Metis gets no love. I really loved Metis throughout this game. I thought she was kind of funny. She was endearing. I like the bond between her and Aegis. Like the ending kind of got me a little bit misty eyed when Aegis was like, "Oh, you're my lonely little sister" or whatever, and it was just like this like, oh my god, this bonding that they're having, and they finally like come back together. All this kind of stuff was really nice. Um, because at the end of the day, I was getting really concerned they were not going to address Metis at all, because Metis when she introduced herself, she was like, "Oh, I was made by the Kirijo group," and it's like, we have no records of you. And I was expecting to be some twist that Chairman Ikutsuki or whatever had a secret robot built or something for a reason to like, oh, if Ikutsuki dies, Metis activates or some dumb shit. I was expecting that kind of twist. And then it was like, nah, she's just a shadow of Aegis, which kind of, the journey kind of teased the theme of, is Aegis a human? Does she have a soul? Is she a person? Is she a robot? What is she? And this kind of plays that even more by her having a shadow. So I do like that the game does eventually explain what Metis is. And I really liked her. I thought she was like a cool companion. I really liked using her. Her dialogue is great. I love when she was using Orgia mode, how she initializes and all this stuff. I really, really liked Metis' character, and her design was amazing. She has this cool like face mask of like this butterfly. She has cool color scheme. She has this cool ass staff. I really like Metis' character, and I like her hair color. I like everything about her. So I don't get why not a lot of people like her. I don't get it. I don't get it, and I won't get it. She's a great character. If you disagree, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you don't agree. But I liked her a lot in The Answer. So I've been talking for like an hour about Persona 3 The Answer because, it was really a mode that I didn't expect much out of, and I got a lot out of it. I do get the criticisms. I don't think it's a perfect mode, but I do think it was worth playing. I definitely want to thank all you guys who stuck with me, who watched me play it, who cheered me on, and gave me words of encouragement, and enjoyed The Answer, because it was fun playing The Answer and experiencing it myself. It was definitely worth it. I think it is up there with one of my favorite Persona stories. Like, I liked the third semester of Persona 5 Royal. I did like that story. My only complaint I had with it was they tried to integrate Kasumi into the main story, and they didn't commit all the way. Like, they would have a scene like, oh, you beat this one palace, go back to school. Okay, welcome back. Oh, there's Kasumi. She says hello. All right, that's the new content. See ya. And it's like, it didn't feel like it was anything worthwhile in the beginning. And I think you didn't really, like, the third semester did a lot of heavy lifting for Kasumi and Maruki. I think Maruki was at least better because you at least got another side of the Phantom Thieves through those interviews. But it just seemed kind of weak how they integrated Kasumi in the base game. Like, it just didn't seem like they really had a plan with her, but they just had to throw her in because they had to explain why you have a third semester, pretty much. But I did like the story of the third semester, as I said in my video that I did. But I think this one's slightly better because this at least commits to its own story. Like, it being a separate mode, I think makes it have a better presentation than in Royal, where it's like they try to weave it into the course of the story with certain requirements you have to meet. While in Persona 3 FES, it's like, hey, you can beat the main story. Now you can do the epilogue and see what happens. You don't have to go through the main story to get to that. It's like its own mode, which I like. I think it has a better presentation, so it makes it a little bit more reasonable to experience that mode. Because I think, like, with Royal, it's still hard for me to recommend it to people who bought the vanilla game, because it's like you're gonna be going through that again to get to the new stuff. While with Persona 3 FES, so you can go straight to the new stuff. But I like The Answer. I think that with all its flaws, I think it did something interesting and unique, and it tried to do something that was different with it. And I don't think it necessarily succeeded because they obviously didn't do it in the other games. Again, I can't speak about Persona 4 Golden. Blame Atlas, as Atlas's fault. But uh, I think there's a lot I appreciate that the answer does, because it does a lot of stuff that you don't see anymore because it wouldn't fly, but it's kind of like charming to see what they attempted to do. If I were to rate the answer, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. Maybe an 8 if on a good day, like, you know. But I do think if you have never played Persona 3, FPS is the version to play. I think if they people talk about Persona 3 Portable, I honestly feel like that should just be remade. The way the story is presented in that, I'm not a fan of. It's just a visual novel, and you have Persona that has great presentation of story, and I just don't think Portable does it justice. I think you need a lot of the presentation that FES does for you to get it, and I do think that the answer should be a thing that people should have access to. So I think they should remake Persona 3 if they were ever put on modern consoles or whatever. Remake it, have it have the answer as a part of it, have it have the gameplay of Portable, the presentation of a Persona game. That's what I would. That's what I would want. I think Persona 3 is this very weird game where it spans like vastly different consoles, and I just can't see the PSP version being definitive outside of them having a female main character. But I think FES is the way to go if you ask me. I think the answer was worth trying out. If you have FES, I say check it out. If you beat Persona 3, go get as far as you can. Think of it as a challenge mode and see how far you can go and try to better yourself. I think it's worth it. I think it's fun. I like the story. I think that'll be it. If I see comments in here that motivate me to do a response video, I will, but we'll see. Thank you guys for watching this video, and as always, thank you for supporting me, watching the videos, supporting me however you do decide, be it Patreon, Twitch, what have you. Thank you for supporting me, and thank you for watching my vids, my streams, and I hope to see you around for the Persona 4 streams that I'll be doing for you guys. See you when I see you. Have a good week. Bye-bye.